No turning back. No turning back. I just want to encourage you and challenge you today. If you are a Jesus follower, if you've surrendered your life to Jesus at some point in your life. Uh, when I was younger, I was a part of, well, my dad started a church called Harvest House, and it was a really different kind of a church. The building we met in used to be a strip club. And my dad's vision was always to have a church that didn't look like a church so that unchurched people who've never encountered Jesus would walk in and then they would have an opportunity to encounter Christ. And so our church ministered to people that were homeless, people that were caught up in drug addiction, heavy drug addiction, people that were getting out of prison, anybody, a doctor, lawyer, politician. Like it was a church that wanted to minister and reach out to anyone. But we had a lot of services that ministered to addicts and homeless people and people coming out of prostitution, things like that. And just outside of town, and so that was in Moncton, New Brunswick, and about a half an hour outside of town, there's a place called Turtle Creek. And Turtle Creek had a little river that we used to go to whenever somebody had surrendered their life to Jesus and wanted to get baptized. We would go out and do baptisms. And I remember as a young boy standing on the shore of this river, and whenever somebody would come up out of the water after they'd been baptized, on the shore we would sing this song, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. And those words have stayed with me and in my mind and heart my whole life. I made a decision to surrender to Jesus at a really young age. I had a really unique upbringing. My dad basically would evangelize, which means tell people about Jesus. He would do that to anybody he met. And so we constantly picked up hitchhikers and would bring them into our home. Or if my dad met somebody who was really struggling with drugs and wanted to get off it, before he ever opened a recovery program, he would bring them into our home. And I heard him tell so many people about Jesus. And so I don't even remember this moment, but when I was 3 years old, I asked my dad if I could ask Jesus into my life so that I could be with him in heaven someday. And so my dad led me through a prayer to receive Christ. All I can tell you is something happened in my heart when I prayed to ask Jesus to come into my life. Even though I don't remember the moment, I can't remember a time in my life where I wasn't aware of God and who he is. At 5 years old, I insisted on getting baptized, and my parents didn't know if I was old enough to understand or if I was ready. They took me to some mentors of theirs who met with me, and after meeting with me, they said to my parents, they said, he knows what he wants. He wants to live for Jesus. He believes in the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. And so at 5, we were at a little Baptist church at this time. This was before the Turtle Creek days. But I was going down into the baptism. I was so small that my hair was spiked up that day. And people that were in the audience said that all they saw when I went down the stairs into the baptismal tank in front of this little Baptist church was like my spiked hair going across the top of the tank. That's all they could see. And so I was young, and I was serious about Jesus. Again, my dad's a very unorthodox, not unorthodox theologically, but just he's an unorthodox thinker in the sense that he doesn't do things the way most people do things. He's very unique in his thinking. And so at 6 years old, he asked me to share my testimony at a prison. And that was back in the days when kids were allowed to go with their parents into prison chapel services. And so whatever a 6-year-old's testimony is, as far as how they came to Jesus, that's what I shared in a prison that day. And it wasn't long after that, it was right around the same time, I was about 6, when we picked up a hitchhiker, and I decided that I wanted to tell this hitchhiker about Jesus before my dad could. And so at 6, I explained in the best way I knew how to this guy what it meant to be a Jesus follower. And I said, do you want to surrender your life to Jesus? And he said, yes. When my dad tells the story, he said he shifted the little rear view mirror, and he was just shocked that this guy responded to a 6-year-old to surrender his life to Christ. But that was normal. So growing up for me, all I knew about the faith was that we put our faith and our trust in Jesus, and then we spend our lives telling others about him. And because of the nature of the ministry that my dad started, I had a rare opportunity to get into ministry at a young age. My dad started a ministry called Harvest House, and it grew into a pretty large organization today that has all kinds of different and various ministries that help people that are in various life stages. But in those early years, there was lots of opportunities for me to be in ministry, to share. I remember the first time I preached a sermon, I was 14 years old. Didn't have any Bible school training, but I had been taught ever since I was young to read the Bible on a daily basis, to pray, to talk to God, to tell others about Jesus. And so at about 14, I shared a sermon, went on a mission trip to Jamaica when I was 15 years old, had opportunities to do all kinds of pretty cool ministry things while I was there, and saw God provide in order for me to be able to go. And anyway, just got into ministry at a young age, and I started leading teams in my teen years, 15, 16 years old. I led teams into youth jails and prisons and talked about Jesus. And I told my friends at school, I went to public school my whole life. I was always telling people about Jesus, what it meant to live for him, to serve him. I got used to being made fun of and kind of being an outcast for being the guy that always talked about Jesus. That was kind of normal for me. And anyway, so that went on for a few years, had some pretty cool opportunities to get into ministry. And in my later teen years, I became really good friends with somebody who had recently come to Christ, and we started doing some ministry together and served the Lord together on various teams, sharing the gospel. But he had a crisis moment in his life where he decided that he was no longer a Christian. This guy, he's a lot smarter than I am, and he did a lot of research, and he was better at research than me. And he started asking some really tough questions about the faith, about what it means to be a Jesus follower, about whether or not those things are actually true. He started asking some psychological questions about how a person like me may be a follower of Jesus because of the way they were raised, the impact that has even on the chemical system in your body, that you do something because of what you've believed your whole life, and to do something opposite would just feel weird to your body. He started asking all kinds of really in-depth questions, and it kind of made me struggle. And I had made a decision in that time in my life. I'm going to serve Jesus regardless of how I feel. But it got really difficult sometimes because I've never been a person that wanted to avoid a difficult question. I've always been frustrated with like the quick cliche Christian answers that don't actually look at evidence. And so I've wanted to be honest about struggles and things like that. And so I continued serving God, but these doubts were there. And my wife and I, Vicky, we got married at 18 years old. And I was really serving in ministry at this time. I was traveling all over the Maritimes. I was speaking in different churches. I was speaking in youth centers, youth prisons, and jails, telling people about Jesus with the teams that I was leading with the Harvest Youth Mission team. God was doing some cool things, but underneath there was this struggle, and I was wrestling through what I believed, and whether or not I truly believed it, whether or not I had truly experienced Jesus. And I came to a crisis point. So at 19 years old, I was offered a position at a church in Grand Manan, New Brunswick. It was Seal Cove Baptist Church, and they offered to hire me as their youth pastor, but they also didn't have a pastor at the time. And so they asked if I would not only be the youth pastor, but I would preach 2 or 3 Sundays a month. And this was an incredible opportunity. So I'm 19 years old, didn't have any Bible school training at all, and I had lots of ministry experience and had grown up doing ministry and reading the scriptures and studying things like that, but no formal education. I was newly married, and this was the first time that I would have an opportunity to do ministry that was outside of the influence of my dad. And so I felt like, okay, this is a real opportunity for me to take a step of faith and to do something that's outside of what I've always known. But I had this question in my mind of like, well, do I really believe? Do I believe Jesus? Or is it just something that I accept because I was taught that and I've got no other option? Is it just the only thing that I've ever known? And so I was wrestling with, worldviews and those kinds of things. And so I remember I asked my dad if I could borrow his car, and I drove just outside of the city of Moncton into the woods. I went down into the woods and I sat on a rock, and I just cried out to God. I said, God, if you want me to serve you, if you want me to say yes to this ministry opportunity, which is basically saying yes to a life of ministry, I just need to know that that you're real. I need to know that this faith that I have is real. And I don't know how long I sat there, probably not super long, but long enough to get frustrated that God wasn't speaking. He didn't open the skies. He didn't speak audibly. And so I was upset. And I remember leaving, and I went back in the car, and I'm driving back into town, and I saw a hitchhiker on the side of the road. And I had always picked up hitchhikers, as you can probably imagine from my upbringing. That was normal. You pick up a hitchhiker, you tell them about Jesus. And when I saw him, I thought, I don't want to pick him up because I don't want to talk about Jesus. But then the next thought that came into my mind was, well, it's still a nice thing to do. Even if you don't believe in God, you should help people. So I thought, okay, I'll pick him up. So I picked him up, gets in the car, and we're driving down. And I had made up my mind. I will not tell this man about Jesus. I'm pretty upset at God. I don't even know what I believe. So we're driving down, and he pulled out a bottle of liquor in a paper bag. And I was thinking, man, this is crazy. Open liquor in the car. I'm going to get in trouble. Anyways, we're driving along, and he was just yammering on about something. He was talking pretty nonstop. Maybe it was because he was drunk. I don't know. But right in the middle of whatever he was saying, he looked at me and he pointed at me and he goes, "Jesus is real." And I was like, I didn't really know what to say, so I don't think I said anything. I just kept driving, and I thought, man, that's kind of bizarre. And then he went on. He was talking about all kinds of other things, and he pulled out a bag of weed. And I was thinking, like, what is going on? This guy's got like open liquor in my car, and he's got a bag of weed, like, and he's telling me that Jesus is real. This is so bizarre. And he was just, again, he was yammering on, going on about something, and then he stopped, and he goes, "Jesus is real." And I was like, and I didn't know how to respond, so I kept driving. And then I found out he was on the wrong highway. The highway we were on was headed towards Nova Scotia. And to get to the one that went to Prince Edward Island, which is where he was headed, you had to go down through the city and get on the other highway. And so anyway, I said, okay, I'll drive into the right highway. And so I drove down through the city and dropped him off. And when I get out of the car, I looked and waved, and he had a big smile on his face, and I'm driving away. And I just sensed God saying to me, "Nathan, did you hear me?" And I realized that God had spoken to me through this hitchhiker who was drinking and carrying around weed. And it just baffled me. And I was like, this was bizarre. And it was enough for me that I said, like, from this moment on, I'm going to just serve Jesus. I accepted the position at Seal Cove Baptist Church as the youth pastor and the preacher. I did that for a while. I still was working with Harvest House. We started a Harvest House in Graham and Ann. Was a part of that, and eventually I moved back to Moncton, New Brunswick, where I served at Harvest House in various roles and some leadership roles, and worked with the homeless shelter and the drug rehab center. And then when I was 26 years old, God opened the door for me to go to Kingswood University, where I studied pastoral ministry for 4 years, graduated with a bachelor degree in theology, pastoral ministry from Kingswood. And then during the time while I was at Kingswood, the Lord put it on my heart to consider church planting. And I had an opportunity to accept a position to move to Thunder Bay, Ontario, to plant a church. And so I said yes to that. And so as soon as I graduated from Kingswood, my family and I, Vicki and I had 4 kids at this time, we moved to Thunder Bay, Ontario with our friends Hannah and Tyler Sears to plant Transformation Church. And we've been here for 4.5 years and seeing God do some pretty incredible things. Currently working on my MDiv through Wesley Seminary, and God is just doing some amazing things in ministry, and he's filling my heart with hope for what he has yet to do. But the reason I want to put this little video out is because I think we right now are facing one of the most challenging times as a church in Canada. Lots of people are walking away from their faith. Lots of people are turning back, going against the lyric of that song, "No turning back, no turning back." Lots of people are turning back for all kinds of different reasons. I think one of the things that I'm seeing a lot right now is this whole deconstruction that's happening within the church. Lots of people who grew up in the church like I did are walking away from their faith. And there's lots of stories that are being told about a lot of the negative things that have been done in church and in the name of Jesus. And there's a lot of truth to some of the stories that are being told. There are lots of things that have been done in Jesus' name that Jesus would be very unhappy about. The church has been involved and complicit in things like racism and prejudice and oppression and abuse. The institution of the church has been involved in all kinds of horrible things. And a lot of people are looking into this history and they're saying, that's horrible. This is terrible. I want nothing to do with it. And this deconstruction movement is huge right now. And it grieves my heart because I really do believe that Jesus Christ is who he says he is. And I really do believe that he came here, he lived as one of us amongst us, he lived a perfect life, he was crucified on the cross, he died, and then God rose him from the dead, he ascended into heaven. Before he ascended, he told his followers to go make disciples of all of the nations. I believe that the message of the gospel is true, that if we put our faith in Jesus, in what he's done, that we're saved, that we're going to be with God for eternity. But I also believe there's been all kinds of horrible things that have been done in his name. And I'm seeing lots of people that are turning away and walking away from Christ. And I just want to challenge you with the lyric of that song, don't turn back. If you've surrendered your life to Jesus, there's no turning back. And what I want to encourage you with is that God promises that he will be with us. And I want to encourage you that if there's even a flicker in your heart, if there's a small measure of faith, if you believe in any small amount about who Jesus is, to fan that flame, to look to Jesus. Don't listen to the message of the world right now. There is an enemy. There is a spiritual force behind a lot of the messaging that comes from the world that wants to discourage Christians and wants to make Christians turn away from their faith. And I just want to encourage you, don't turn back. Think of the lyric of that song, I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back, no turning back. God really is up to stuff. He really is at work. And he promises to be with us as we look to him and as we trust him. And I believe that in our lifetime, we're going to see God do some pretty incredible things. I believe that in Canada, we're going to see some incredible things happen, that God is going to do a mighty work in his church, that right now we're going through a difficult time. I mentioned deconstruction. The whole COVID issue is also causing lots of people to walk away from their faith, causing division within the church. And we're just going through a really challenging time. And I believe behind all of it, that the church is kind of being shaken right now, and there's people walking away for various reasons, but God is in the midst of it. And God is going to do an incredible work in and through the church. And he wants to strengthen those who trust him. And I want to encourage you to trust Jesus. No turning back. I pray that the peace of Christ would reign in your heart today and that you would look to him. May the Lord bless you.